Hello and welcome back to CalisPrep's SAT Writing and Language course. My name's Evan and today we're going to be looking at passage organization and how the SAT tests this concept. So let's quickly look at how the SAT is going to ask you to solve passage organization questions, look at a few tips and tricks, and then look at a brief passage that's going to test some of the concepts that we discussed here. So fundamentally, what the SAT is going to want you to do is, for organization, they're going to want you to rearrange a paragraph or replace a single sentence within a paragraph so that the paragraph flows more logically. Now, how they're going to do that is, we'll see in a second, they place a little number before each sentence and they ask you, where should sentence 1 go in context of the paragraph? And you have to decide whether to move it or keep it where it is. So, as usual, our tips and tricks here, the number 1 is always going to be the process of elimination. That's always going to be the best way for us to kind of reduce our number of answers so that if we have to guess, we can at least make an educated guess and reduce our chances of getting it wrong. In addition to that, what you want to be able to do for these passage organization questions is write as soon as possible when you're reading a passage, identify what the main topic of the passage is, and then try to kind of assign a structure to each paragraph. So once you have your main topic, decide what each paragraph is doing in reference to that main topic. Now that means making notes of any shifts in tone or topic between paragraphs. For example, what an author might do is introduce a topic and then immediately present a counter-argument. Now that would represent a shift in topic because we're going from a topic to the opposite of that topic, a counter-argument for it. So with those quick tips in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at a passage here. So this one's titled Punch and Judy, and go ahead now, pause the video, take a minute to read this passage, and then we'll discuss number 1. Alright, now that you've had a chance to read this first paragraph here, let's take a look at what we're trying to solve. So number 1 is asking us to make this paragraph most logical. Sentence 2 would most logically be placed. So what we have to decide now is, first of all, what is sentence 2 talking about? And then we have to decide, well, what clues can we use within that sentence to decide where it should go if it doesn't belong there? So the first sentence tells us what we're kind of talking about as the main topic of this passage, and that's going to be the Punch and Judy puppet shows in England. And so then from there we go straight into the sentence number 2 that we're trying to place, and it says his character evolved from a tricky character in 16th century Italian comedy. So what we have to ask here is, right, the subject of our sentence is his character, and yet we don't really have a reference for who he is or who his character is. We can assume it's Punch because we're given Punch and Judy as our only characters here, but it's not made clear in the first sentence that we're really talking about Punch here. So what we need to do is find the sentence in this paragraph that goes into a description of Punch. Once we know who Punch is or a little bit about him, we can make the subject of the next sentence, his character originated here. And now when we look at what is currently sentence 3, we see that that one immediately says the mischievous Mr. Punch usually has a bent back and other features. So good. Sentence 3 is really telling us who Mr. Punch is, so it makes sense that sentence 2 would come after sentence 3. What that would do is it would establish Mr. Punch Punch in the third sentence, and then after the sentence labeled 3, we would come up with that sentence that's currently sentence 2, that starts with his character. So that's exactly what we're going to do here. If we look at our other options, none of them really fit. We know we don't want it to be answer choice A. We get rid of that one because we don't want his character coming at the very beginning of a topic or a paragraph because we don't know who he is. So we get rid of 1, we get rid of 2 because, again, we don't really know enough after the first sentence to say his character. So we're going to go with answer choice C here because answer choice D, putting it after sentence 4, doesn't really work because in sentence 4 we're not talking about Punch. So saying his character after that doesn't really make sense. Good. So this is really the basic process for analyzing the organizational patterns in these SAT writing and language passages. What we want to do is we want to look for text clues such as his character, which gives us a pronoun. We have to ask, who does that pronoun belong to? Once we can determine that, we know where this sentence should go. Sometimes it'll be a bit trickier. It'll require more logic and less grammar clues. Sometimes you don't get a pronoun to say, okay, well, who is he and where does he go in this sentence or in this paragraph? And what you have to do instead is look for the flow, how the paragraph is progressing and whether you're adding an example or so on. So this first one was a fairly easy example of this concept, but it illustrates very well what some of the things you can do to look for the clues. Now, we've got this second part of the passage up on the board now, so go ahead, again, pause the video and review this quick part of the passage and press play when you're ready to proceed. All right. So now that you've had a chance to read this second part of the passage, let's take a look at what they want us to do. Again, they're giving us these numbers before each sentence. That's telling you that we've got an organizational question, and it's telling you that you're going to have to place the sentence somewhere else or decide that it's appropriate where it is now. So we have, in this case, we want to place sentence 5 somewhere. So what we want to do is first make sure we understand what this paragraph as a whole is talking about. Now, when we read through this passage, we realize that it's really just talking about the structure of these Judy and Punch shows. It's telling us kind of some common features or what Punch does most of the shows. So what we need to do now is decide where we can say each Punch and Judy show is different as there is no set plot. So what we're deciding here is, well, each Punch and Judy show is different. There's no set plot. Great. We know this now, but where does this go within the paragraph? Well, what we want to do is decide, first of all, whether this makes a sufficient intro or conclusion, because that's really the easiest place to start. If we know really whether it's an intro or conclusion, we can just end it right now. So what we have here is when we go back to sentence 1, let's see if this is a good intro, and we actually have a pretty good sign here. We see that sentence 1, or what's currently sentence 1, says generally, Punch behaves in an outrageous manner. Now this is interesting because this paragraph right now begins with generally, meaning that in general something happens. Now when we look at sentence 5, we see that each Punch and Judy show is different as there is no set plot. So it makes sense to follow that sentence with the statement generally and then give some common plot features. What we're saying here in the intro, or what is currently sentence 5 but will become the intro shortly, is that every show is different and there's no set plot. That's kind of establishing this theme that we're talking about, the plot of Punch and Judy, and that every one of them is going to be individual. Now, what we do from there is we add that second sentence, generally Punch behaves this way, and the rest of the paragraph talks about features that are common in Punch and Judy shows. So good, we've actually established very quickly that sentence 5 here is making a really good intro sentence. So before we go with choice A, which is telling us to put it before sentence 1, making it the intro, we want to make sure that we don't have any other tempting options here. So when we look at putting it after sentence 3, well, sentence 3 is talking about Punch and what he does during the performances, how he talks while the audience can see something sneaking up behind him. And well, we don't really want this very general statement that each Punch and Judy show is different to come right after a very specific instance of what might happen in a show. The reason for this is it simply doesn't fit. Sentence 5 is more general, whereas sentence 4 and 3 are really giving very specific instances of what happens in these shows. And just as a quick aside, in general on the SAT, or most writing really, an author will work from general to specific. And that's kind of a good organizational pattern or strategy to keep in mind. Most writers, they start with the general topic and then they work into more and more specific examples, and then the conclusion broadens out again and tells you the implications of what's been talked about. Good, so we're still feeling really good about choice A here, but let's check out choice C. Do we want to keep it where it is now? Well, no, that's the same thing as with answer choice B. We don't want it where it is now because, again, we're working from general to specific in this paragraph, and sentence 4 is pretty specific. We don't want to work back to a general statement. We want to put that general statement at the beginning for A. And, of course, we could put it after sentence 6. That would make it a conclusion. But that doesn't really work because in this case, the conclusion, or rather the last sentence, although the character's behavior is often violent, audience tend to find it silly rather than humorous, that's working back out to a general statement. But that general statement's more about the comedy or what goes on in the Punch and Judy shows. And sentence 5, what we're trying to place, that one's talking more about the overall structure of it. So after using our process of elimination, we can be very sure that choice A is going to be correct here. We want to put this sentence 5 before sentence 1 and make it an introduction so that we can work from general to specific. Good. So that really concludes this passage for today. This is really the only way that the SAT tests organizations regularly. However, we'll look at transitions next time. Transitions have a lot to do with organization, so we kind of treat that separately. But keep in mind that whenever you see those numbered sentences, you're going to be dealing with an organization question on the SAT writing and language test. Those are kind of the calling cards of organization questions. So tune in next time for a little bit on transitions, which should conclude any talk of organization on the SAT writing and language section. Thanks for tuning in today, and my name's Evan, and I'll see you next time.